So I want to focus on one slide on what may prevent us to be able to move in that direction, and focus on our cognitive biases that may be working against us. The first one that I would identify is essentialism. Essentialism is the belief that any entity is defined by its essence. So essentialism as a bias is to view this presentation as essentially medical or essentially psychiatric. And depending on who the clinician is, when they come to encounter with the patient, you may just think that if this is medical, it cannot be psychiatric. And if this is purely, you may think that this is purely behavioral. And that would be a bias that would lead you away from being able to recognize the disease. I think the best way for me, the experience that I've acquired to recognize the disease, is to actually focus particularly on the catatonic signs. Because those signs are prevailing across all the autoimmune limbic encephalitis. And we've heard them really well described by Susanna, and they're described well in the literature. The paroxystic agitation, the stereotypical, some of the grimacing that initially may look like seizures but might not be seizures, some of the drooling, the hypertension that might actually be more than hypertension but autonomic dysfunction, the difficulty moving, being locked in your body, suddenly having movements that are repetitive, etc. If you can identify these signs, and then if you can think along the lines of what Bill was telling us and recognize that there are other psychiatric symptoms in those patients. They have hallucinations, they have psychosis, they have paranoia, but they also have neurological symptoms. I think that may help you bridge between these two worlds. The second curse, though, and just to say one thing about the treatment here. So the treatment of catatonia, of course, is to first focus on benzodiazepines. And as you know, you should try to avoid using antipsychotics in catatonia. And here again, you want to try to avoid that because it may murky the picture. And you should really try to first use benzodiazepine as a supportive treatment. But the second bias here is the curse of knowledge. The problem now becomes, oh yeah, I've identified this as catatonia. I'm an expert in my field, I know catatonia. 86% of catatonics are bipolar, or schizophrenics. It just looks like bipolar, schizophrenic, or schizoaffective disorder. This is what it is, and let's just go on with the plan. So there's a curse to knowing too much, where we may think that catatonia is always a psychiatric condition, when it really is not. Catatonia is just a cluster of symptoms that occur when something is really wrong with the brain, and the brain is on fire, for example. I just also want to point to another bias here that's important, the stereotypical bias. Unfortunately, 81% of autoimmune encephalitis are going to touch young women. I still believe that there is a big bias against women, and if it's a young woman that acts crazy, then she must have a psychiatric disease. I think we've thought like this for many decades, and I'm concerned that this stereotypical bias may play against our patient. I'm also concerned that it may play against their management, and I'm a little concerned when I read the Japanese literature, where before they move in the gradation and the steps of treatment that Heather just talked to you about, they just actually go for bilateral ovarectomy before they even have the proof of a tumor. So you end up with a young woman with a brain on fire who comes out of it menopause. So I do think that we have to go through the gradation of the treatment Heather mentioned, and we also have to remember about that bias. Bias in treatment of psychiatric patients has always existed, and we are part of it.